The Second Sino-Japanese War started in 1937 when Japan invaded China. It ended in 1945 when Japan surrendered after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This war was a part of the wider war in the Pacific. And so how did China's war effort contribute to the Japanese surrender? Well, firstly, by tying down huge amounts of Japanese resources and manpower on the mainland, China prevented these resources from being used against the Allies elsewhere in the Pacific. For example, at its peak, there were around 85 divisions of the Imperial Japanese Army fighting in China, around 2 million soldiers. That's almost half of the entire Japanese military. By forcing Japan to keep so many troops in China, the Chinese were able to prevent Japan from expanding its military operations elsewhere. Secondly, the war in China was a drain on Japanese resources. China was just too big. The Japanese simply couldn't subdue it. This is partly because of the vast distances involved. Fighting a war on multiple fronts is hard. It requires lots of supplies, equipment, and manpower. But the Chinese managed to inflict heavy casualties on the Japanese, and they wasted huge amounts of supplies. This meant that fewer Japanese troops and supplies were available to fight the Allies elsewhere in the Pacific. For instance, in 1942, the Japanese 15th Army was sent to Burma to capture the vital Burma Road. This was the supply route between India and China. The Japanese thought that if they cut off this supply line, then China would collapse. But the Japanese didn't realize how determined the Chinese were to keep the Burma Road open. The Chinese 200th Division, for example, fought a series of brilliant delaying actions against the Japanese, actions which inflicted heavy casualties and wasted time. This meant that the Japanese couldn't complete their mission. In the end, the Japanese 15th Army was virtually destroyed. This is just one example of how the Chinese war effort helped the Allies. In general, the longer the war in China lasted, the weaker Japan became. So to answer the question, China's contribution to the war effort was mainly strategic. By tying down huge numbers of Japanese troops and supplies, China prevented Japan from defeating the Allies in other theaters of war. And so the war in China is an important part of the story of how the Allies won the war in the Pacific. To learn more about the war in China, click here. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.